Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisance. Prabhuji, your voice is not coming. Shikhimati Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, you can unmute your mic.
Putting it back. How about now?
Okay, now, okay, it's clear, Prabhuji. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So we are very fortunate and honored to have association of His Grace Sikhimati Prabhuji today for this for his auspicious association. And I will just give a brief introduction about Prabhuji. Prabhuji is a long-time book distributor and joined ISKCON in 1974 in Chicago. He was the temple treasurer and book distributor in those days. After Srila Prabhupada's departure, Prabhu served in West Africa with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj and His Holiness Brahmanand Swami Maharaj, helping to pioneer ISKCON's mission there. And he also preached in Kenya and Uganda in those days. Currently, Prabhuji is the temple president of New Vrindavan, Philadelphia, and currently the co-president of ISKCON of Atlanta. So we are very fortunate to have Prabhu's association for today's session. And we are going to hear about Srila Prabhupada pastime and some interactions with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj. Prabhu's early days in Krishna consciousness. Prabhu was the book distributor in those days, so we have a lot to hear from Prabhuji. So we welcome Prabhu by chanting one time loudly Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for inviting me to speak. And my only fortune is that Krishna has mercy on me, and Srila Prabhupada came and saved me, or saved all of us, we should say. So I'll begin with some pranams to Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nivesesha Sunyavadi Pasya Jaleshtarani Vanchakapa Turubhyas Cha Kripas Indubeva Cha Pati Tanam Pamebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasvi Gaur Bhaktivinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. I also want to acknowledge and give special thanks to Parashram Prabhu for organizing this calls, and it's not an easy task. So we all should also thank him for all this service. And I'm kind of new to Zoom, so it's I'm more accustomed to speaking to people in front of me. Anyway, I was playing around with it, and you see I put this picture of Prabhupada back here. This is how I think of Srila Prabhupada. Taking the risks and doing what's not conventional. Why? Is he some kind of narcissist just looking for some glory? No. To please his Guru Maharaj. And up to that point in the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, this next step, which we are experiencing now, no one knew what to do, really. And we see here Srila Prabhupada sitting amongst all these people, giving them Krishna consciousness. It's such a phenomenal thing. Generally, it was expected that if you go alone to the place of the Malechas, well, you're going to fall down, because you're going to incur so much sinful reaction, and you're not living in a holy place. But these great souls, wherever they go, they make that place a holy place. This is the power of one who has a love for Krishna and for his Guru. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, because I don't hear myself speaking. I have to get used to this experience here. Chaitanya Charitamrita says, Brahmananda Brahmaiti Kona Bhagavan Jiva. Guru Krishna Prasaded by Bhakti Lata Beach, that this seated devotion, it comes by the mercy of Krishna. So when I look at how it is, somehow or another, I came to this devotional service, definitely, materially speaking, you look, there is no qualification that could justify becoming a devotee, what to speak of seeing Srila Prabhupada. My family background was, actually I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, but my mother, she was a teacher for the American government on the federal level, not on the state level. And she worked for a division that still exists today. It was called the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So of course, we're not talking about American Indians. As we know, the history of America, Columbus was trying to go to India. So when he landed here and he saw the natives, he thought, oh, these must be Indians. So we could see what was to come. The Indians were going to come. That was predicted by Christopher Columbus. You can see like that. So my mother worked with this federal department that managed the affairs of the American Indians. And as a result, she lived in very remote parts of the country, in Alaska, Arizona. I was born in Atlanta, but she moved to Arizona, to an area where they were helping the American Indians. And very obscure. We didn't see anyone. It was so remote. For the first 10 years of my life, maybe I saw 20 Western people, 20 families. We saw one car a day. That was pretty unique. Eventually, my mother and family, my mother, father, they moved to another very small, obscure place, Gary, Indiana, outside of Chicago. And she was a school teacher for the state system at that time. And my uncle was the principal of the high school. So my childhood was like that. It was in those days that middle-class American kind of family. You have, 2 cars, a garage, and all those things. When I was 16, my brother and I shared a car. And I grew up in school participating on swimming team, tennis team, orchestra, all these typical things that the American lifestyle provided in those days. But yet somehow or another, even at that young age, I always wondered, who am I? Why was I born like this? Why was I not born in the family across the street? They seem more opulent, they have more facility. Why am I born in this way? And even though materially speaking, there wasn't much want or need, still I felt I wasn't satisfied. And desires are forcing themselves on me. So in America, as we know, the people are generally Christian. And of course, my mother was that way. And she would take me to church often. And I would ask questions to them like that. Why are we born like this? What does God look like? Why is he hiding from us? So Christian philosophy is very vague. It's very simple. Just the basics are there. God is great. God is good. Let us thank him for our food. So no one can answer those questions. And so therefore I wasn't very religious. I said, then why should I follow anything? It doesn't make any sense. If there's a God, why does he abandon us and just leave us down here to struggle? So as I grew up, by the time I was 16, my brother, who was a couple of years older than me, he graduated from the high school and was attending a university in Chicago. And just by chance, he came across, of course, we know it's not chance, this is Krishna's arrangement. He met the devotees performing Harinam Sankirtan on the streets of Chicago in 1971. And it's kind of hard to imagine if you try to visualize this, what was America at that time? At that time, even myself, I love hunting and fishing. My uncle was an avid hunter and fisher. So I would always accompany him on the weekends for these animal killing excursions. And I loved it. And I never even heard of vegetarian before. This is what the culture was, at least the culture I grew up in. I didn't grow up as a hippie. Most of us see, like in the picture back here, these are the hippies. They have some idea of Indian philosophy a little bit and things like that, vegetarian. But I grew up in a very small community. Never heard of these things, never was interested in them at all. So what to speak of my brothers downtown, he sees people with shaved head and tilak, saffron cloth on. Most people would run away if they seen someone like that. But he approached them and they sold him one Back to God 8 magazine. And I remember the day when he came home and he came rushing down to my room. He says, "You won't believe it, read this." And he gives me the Back to God 8 magazine. And I read it the best I could. And when I was finished reading that magazine, I was like, yes, this is it. All the questions were answered. We're not the body. We took birth because of our karma. This is what God looks like. It was such a relief to me. I still remember that it was such a relief to read and receive that knowledge. So I told him, I said, you have to get more books. I said, this is it. This is what we're looking for. And I'm not sure when, but eventually, because he was going to the university, in those days, they sold Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita in the bookstore. Macmillan still had the contract. And he came home with the Bhagavad Gita that Prabhupada had translated and commented on. And I read through that. Of course, you have to understand, I'm at that time 16-year-old boy. I don't know how to pronounce Krishna, Arjuna, all these words. So I would just skip over most of the things in there and just, take what I could and comprehend it. Anyway, we lived, Gary, Indiana's a bit far from Chicago, and the temple itself was in Evanston. And I don't know why, I never had the idea that we should go find this temple, but I read the books. My brother ended up getting more books for me, some small books. So by the time I graduated from high school, it was time for me to go to college also. And I was going to go to a school in New York to study music. And when I go to the airport, this is the first time I see devotees. In those days, they sold their books and their dhotis. And I look in the distance and I see the saffron cloth brahmachari selling books. And immediately I'm just in awe. I said, it's the man in the book. I can't believe it. Look, he's giving this knowledge to everyone. So he approached me and he sold me a Krishna book and another book. And he must have been a new devotee because he didn't spend much time with me at all. He just sold me the books and he walked off. And I was too shy to ask him anything. I was too much awe. So from there, anyway, it's a long story. Eventually I went to New York and I did visit the temple one Sunday, but it was very far from where I lived. Very difficult. I'm from a small town, so New York was kind of bewildering to me. So many people and we were all warned, be careful in New York, it's very dangerous. But after visiting the temple, everything changed. Once you read these books, your whole life changes. So I decided at that point, I want to be a devotee. And this is what I'm going to dedicate my life to, just from reading Prabhupada's books. I didn't have much idea what to do or how to do it. So I left New York and went back home because I was staying with one of my aunts. And she was telling my mother how, he's not going to, he dropped out of music school. He doesn't want to do anything. He wants to be one of these Hare Krishnas. You better do something about this. So they sent me back home. And my mother told me, I don't care what you want to do, but you're going to have to get your college education. And I remember at that time also, really before that, when I first reading the books, After reading them, I told her immediately, I'm not going to eat meat anymore because I'm following this now. And here it says you shouldn't kill animals. And she was very upset about that. So arguing with me back and forth. She took me to the doctor, I remember, and the doctor was explaining to me how if you don't eat meat, you would die. This is how people thought in those days. Nowadays, no one talks like that anymore. They're all trying to eat less meat. It's all Prabhupada's mercy. But back then, oh, you had to be a madman if you didn't want to eat meat. So finally, she takes me home, I remember, and she says, okay, fine. You don't want to eat meat? That's okay. I'm not going to cook any more vegetables. No, that's all you're going to have to eat is meat, or you don't eat anything. So that was my struggle to be a devotee. So anyway, she sends me down to Purdue University. And in my heart, I just wanted to be a devotee. After being down there 1 month, I just couldn't take it anymore. I decided, I don't care what she says, I'm going to be a devotee. So I looked in a magazine, Back to Godhead magazine, and I found the closest temple, which was Chicago, which was about 200 miles away. And I called them on the phone and I said, I want to be a devotee. What do I have to do? So the devotee who answered the phone, he told me, well, just come to the temple. I said, okay. He says, okay, and he hung the phone up. In those days, people didn't really preach much. They were so busy selling books and so many people were joining. It was just, I don't know. I guess he figured, okay, let him come to the temple and we'll talk about it or something. I don't think he realized I was 200 miles away. So anyway, when I hung the phone up, to me, that meant I should move in the temple. So maybe I called my brother. I said, you have to come down here and you drive me to this address. I'm going to move into the Hare Krishna temple. And he told me, I'm not going to do that because, you know, mother said you have to finish school. And I'm not, I said, at that time, I owned a lot of musical instruments and so many things. I said, okay, I tell you what, you take me to school and you can have all my things. He said, okay. So that was my bribe, kind of like, it's like Raghunath Dasan, one of them, you know, that way. So anyway, he drives me up there, drops me off at the temple. I knock on the door and they invite me in. They take me to the temple president's office. And I tell them, well, I called on the phone the other day and I said I want to be the devotee. So they told me to come. So here I am. So he talked to me a little bit and he says, well, you know, you haven't been here long enough. You don't really know enough. You need to visit for a while. I said, I called him on the phone and he told me to come. Now I'm here. It's 200 miles away. What do you want me to do? Why didn't he tell me that on the telephone? Because you have to understand, I'm reading the books, but I'm skipping over a lot of it because I don't understand the Sanskrit. I don't want to take the time. So I really didn't know you're supposed to chant Hare Krishna or any of these things. I just skipped over that. But I understood from Prabhupada's books, if you want to be a devotee, then you need to move into the temple. Somehow or another, I got that sense out of that from just reading Prabhupada's books. So he said, okay, fine, you can stay for a while, but you can't shave your head. So he had one of the other bhaktas come and get me. He's a good friend of mine. His name is Rama Kelly Das. He passed away a few years ago. He was Bhaktaratni then. So he comes immediately. This is how they engaged bhaktas in those days. Is, okay, you come with me. He takes my things and puts them in a little corner and he takes me straight to the kitchen. And he says, you see all those pots down there? I've never seen pots that big before, you know, the standard kitchen pots. And even in those days, we were even less organized. A big pots and a sink about this big. So you're going to wash all those pots. And I look at him and said, how do you wash them? Are you crazy? This thing doesn't even fit in the sink. You just wash them. That's it. You understand? That's it. And he walks off. And I think, oh my God. Okay, I want to be the devotee. I guess I have to do all these things. So I'm washing all the pots and all these things. And I'm really, really tired. So in those days, it was very austere. That place was an old YMCA, which is a kind of like it's called Young Men's Christian Association. It has a swimming pool, which they didn't use. They just stored things in it and people would sleep around that. They converted gymnasium into a temple room, and it was packed full of devotees, maybe 70 devotees, and we're all just sleeping on the floor on our little sleeping bags. So next morning they wake me up, first time getting up. And in those days, also very austere. Nobody believed in wasting any of Krishna's money, especially on what they considered sense gratification. So in Evanston in those days, there was no hot water. They cut all the hot water knobs off because, you know, why should we waste money on hot water? And devotees should, cold shower is good for you. Now, mind you, this is like November, December in Chicago, very cold. And so this is my next day of Krishna consciousness, get up 3 o'clock in the morning, stand in line with all these devotees with your little bucket, because they would wash their dhotis while they're waiting with their feet in the bucket. And then you throw it out and you jump in that cold shower and then straight to Mangalarti. So I also remember now explaining to me japa, which I didn't understand at that time. I mean, I'm sitting down to chant my japa, and here comes Bhakti Ratni again, tapping me on the shoulders. You're coming with me. But now I had an excuse. No, I have to chant this japa. They told me, no, don't you worry about it. You're coming with me now. You're going back to the kitchen. So this is the routine for anybody who joined. You do the kitchen service all times a day. You're just in there washing pots. So of course, when I was at home, my mother seemed to favor me. I never had to wash dishes or anything. Now Krishna's having me wash the largest pots I've ever seen in my life all the time. So I look out and I say, I see those devotees. What are they doing? Oh, they're going out to sell books. Can I do that? No, you haven't been here long enough. You keep washing those pots. So eventually, though, it took a couple of weeks. There's so many people joining. The new guy comes in, then I get to come out of the kitchen and he starts washing pots. You probably heard of Sadaputa. I think maybe some of you have. He was one of the early devotees who joined, who had a PhD in mathematics. And he also was in this position when they discovered he had PhD. He's in the Atlanta temple washing pots. Somehow they discovered he has PhD in mathematics. So he was pulled out of that service to work with Sadhu Damodar Maharaj on the Bhaktivedanta Institute. So while we're just humble service in those days, we're just trying to please Prabhupada. This was the mood in the temple. Whatever it took, we're prepared to do that so that we can push Prabhupada's mission forward. So after serving like that for some time, eventually Prabhupada was coming to the temple. And this was in June, I believe it was. I joined around November. And I've been there, usually the standard was after 6 months. If you could make 6 months of that, you get first initiation. So I was ready to get initiated, approved, and Prabhupada was coming. By that time, I think we had maybe third canto of Bhagavatam, maybe the first part of the third canto was out. Most of the books that were just coming out one a month, almost on that schedule. So I've read his books, I've been serving. We had the movie, the Hare Krishna people. We would show that almost every Sunday for the guests. So you've seen Prabhupada in the video. And now he's coming. So anyway, we go to the airport to greet Prabhupada. And you have to understand that, like I mentioned earlier, in those days, people in America, Americans are pretty hard now, but they were very hard in those days. It was either the American way or it was no way. Everybody else was wrong. You have to dress like us. You have to walk like us. You have to value the things we value. Otherwise, you're just a loser and who cares for you? So we were 100% opposite of what Americans claim to be the highest standard. We're shaped, they preferred nice hair. We had no hair. We had tilak and our saffron robes and singing on the street, and they did not like this at all. But the devotees were very bold and brave. And we just have to tolerate and continue pushing this movement, even though there's so much opposition to us. Legally, we had the right to sing on the street, to sell books, but yet we were harassed constantly I can't remember how many times they've been taken to jail for chanting. Matter of fact, we were harassed so much in Chicago that we hired a lawyer. And in those days, we were spending about $50,000 a year just on that lawyer. That's probably the equivalent of, $300,000 a year nowadays. But we had to have it because they were trying to stop us. So this lawyer is very clever. At one point, he decided to sue the city because every time they would arrest us and we go in front of the judge would just dismiss the case. So he finally sued the city of Chicago for harassment. And they lost the case and they had to give us $20,000 in penalties. And that judge told them, if you bother those people again, we're going to charge you $30,000, $40,000. You leave them alone. So we considered this a great victory. And we had our little paper to prove that they shouldn't harass us. And all they did this time, instead of taking us to jail, they just beat us on the street instead and let you go. So what kind of victory was that, Anyway, in this atmosphere, we're going to the airport to greet Srila Prabhupada. And what do? We walk in that airport with about 50 devotees with kirtan. I am at that time 19 years old. And I'm thinking, are they mad? Why are we going in the airport with all these devotees? They're gonna arrest us. They're gonna arrest Prabhupada. That's what I was thinking. And sure enough, as soon as we walk in, all the policemen are standing around. You can see them very upset, frowning. All the local people looking at us with disgust, you people, what is wrong with you? And we go right up to the terminal with the big kirtan and waiting for Prabhupada to come through the gate. So if you can just visualize the scene, these devotees crowded there, and we have all our paraphernalia. We have big umbrella that we're going to hold over Prabhupada, and chamras and flower petals waiting. And all these karmis, for lack of a better word, just upset. And just to show you the potency of the pure devotee. So when Prabhupada comes, by that time he was well known, so he was given a lot of courtesy. Generally, he was allowed to depart the plane first. And you can imagine the excitement even in myself, of course. I've never seen Prabhupada. I'm just waiting. I've been serving. I'm like, wow, we can finally get to see the pure devotee. You've seen the videos, but to interact with him in person is not quite, it's a different experience than just watching the video. And finally, we can look through the door and you see the dandas and the saffron, and the door opens, and there's Srila Prabhupada and all his servants. And it's just phenomenal to see, because I tell this story often, of course. If you think about how, imagine if you're going to wherever, some devotee is going to greet you at the airport and you have 20 devotees having kirtan waiting for you. Our typical reactions are we all kind of smile, or we try to show that, oh no, I'm neutral, I'm not, enjoying this. But Prabhupada, he doesn't have a false ego. He is not like us. He's totally different than us, and you can see that. And when he came through that door, it was his reaction that you were expecting was not that. It was something, all we can say is transcendental. And everyone was just in awe, and you didn't know what to do. You just looked at him. That's why you see people stand and they freeze, because he doesn't react the same way most people react. So therefore, you don't know how to react to his reaction. You just stand in awe and you feel like serving. And immediately the devotees have the umbrella over his head, the chamras are going, and the flower petals are being put at his feet as he walks. And I'm just watching him. Oh my God, look, you can just see he's so determined, so much energy is there. And at the same time, very grave, like he's fixed on his mission, in a sense. And at the same time, not grave. And he comes through that airport, and I'm watching him. And then just as he turns the corner, I look, and those same policemen that have been harassing us, giving us such bad attitude. Now they're walking a little bit on the side of Prabhupada in the front, very proudly, making people move out the way. You, out the way, move, you, back, back. Immediately they start serving. Anyone that saw Prabhupada, they changed. For us, they beat. For Prabhupada, now they're okay, and they're serving. They're walking along. Even at Karmis, they didn't give Prabhupada that horrible stare, like, you disgusting people. You could see on their faces too, bewildered. Like, wow, what is this? They don't know what to do. They just stand there and look. And in this way, we take Prabhupada out to the car and he goes back to the temple. All those policemen that saw Prabhupada that day, from what I remember, I didn't go to the airport much to sell books. I mainly sold books on the street, but a few times I go to the airport. They didn't bother us anymore. After they saw Prabhupada, they didn't bother us anymore. So this is that power of that pure devotee. So he goes back to the temple, and I have a couple more pastimes there in the temple even. This is mentioned in June. So somehow or another, generally when Prabhupada would visit America, he couldn't visit all the temples because there's too many temples to visit. He's already, body is very old. Of course, when you see him, he didn't act like an old man, that's for sure. But to travel like that is very taxing. Anyone who travels knows it takes a lot of energy out of you. And imagine, every 3 days you're going to another place. Or sometimes maybe you stay a week. He stayed in Chicago for about 10 days, I believe. And anyway, the next morning, I can't remember the next morning, but my next remembrance of Prabhupada would be him coming to greet the deities in Chicago temple. And somehow or another, I positioned myself right in the front. So as he's coming through with a wall of sannyasis, Tamal Krishna, I can't remember when it was this, Sudam Maharaj, you all may not know him. He passed away many years ago. I can't remember Brahmananda was there, but those two for sure I remember. And I'm
Class goes to 7 o'clock.
What was that? Okay. Anyway, I'm in great awe. And so Tamal Krishnamurti sees me kind of full energy, I guess, in the light. So he gives me Prabhupada's chutter and cane to hold. So I get to be in an entourage with him in the back. I'm right behind Prabhupada. And I'm thinking, wow, Krishna's so merciful. In those days, Chicago only had a picture of the Panchatattva. We didn't have Gaura deity. So Prabhupada comes to that picture of the Panchatattva, offers his obeisances, and he bows down. And the temple room is packed full of devotees. The temple was so packed because, as I mentioned earlier a little bit, that Prabhupada would visit so many temples. And, but generally, for instance, Prabhupada's in Chicago. Devotees in Atlanta were not allowed just to drive up to Chicago to see Prabhupada. You have to keep doing your service. But this time they arranged that not only a lot of temples, Toronto, Detroit, and a few other temples were allowed to come, and the Radha Damodar bus party was there. So it was really packed full of devotees. They were going to have a big initiation ceremony. Big in those days. Not nowadays are much bigger, of course. And as a result, there's no room to really pay obeisances. So Prabhupada lays down and pays his obeisances, full dandavats, and his feet are there. And all of a sudden, this inner voice tells me, you should touch Prabhupada's feet. And I remembered earlier, Tamal Krishna had come and he was giving us instructions how to behave with Prabhupada. And one of them was, do not touch Prabhupada's feet. Because Prabhupada had mentioned to him, I believe in India, that he was becoming ill because so many people in India were touching his feet. And as a result, he was having difficulty translating. So he said, don't let anyone touch his feet. So, I mean, I would think probably he meant the non-devotees, because that day he's going to initiate me, take all my karma. It was a question of what touching his feet is going to do, right? So anyway, this little voice in my head said, you should touch Srila Prabhupada's feet. I said, oh, wow, I really would like to do that, but we were instructed don't touch his feet because, we shouldn't give him any of our karma or anything. Well, you're going to get initiated. He's going to take all your karma anyway. What are you talking about? And the voice is going on and on about how, you're never going to have this opportunity again because the movement had been going on for quite a bit. And I'm such a new devotee. What opportunity do I have to become close to Prabhupada? I'm not going to be invited into the darshan room. I'm not going to go on the morning walks or any of those things because I'm too new. Which is the fact, the best thing we could do at that time was you could fan Prabhupada while he's giving the class. So there's always this queue of devotees standing there waiting to fan, and Prabhupada's classes were not that long, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So people would, hey, come on, hurry up, don't hold all the time. Share the fan, and you better wait. It's my turn now. So those moments to be close to Prabhupada were far and few, unless you could do something extraordinary, which a few devotees were able to do. They called up to Prabhupada. So anyway, I'm having this battle in my mind. And then Prabhupada gets up and he goes to Kishori's altar. And the voice is telling me again, says, listen, when those devotees, when Prabhupada's paying his obeisances, they're not going to even see you touching his feet. You should do it. I said, no, I can't do it. He says, if you don't do it, you will never get this chance again. So finally I decided, okay, I'll do it. So in that Kishori's altar, when he bows down, I bow down very gently, and with my head, I just softly put him on the bottom of his feet, like that. So I think I'm one of the few people who got to touch the bottom of Srila Prabhupada's feet and get the dust. But as I came up, somehow or another, Tamal Krishna Maharaj saw me doing that. So he became very upset. He took that chuttering cane away from me, and I just kind of humbly went. But anyway, that's, if you want some mercy, you almost have to take it. Even getting Prabhupada's Maha, I know time is getting a little short, so I'll cut the pastimes down a little bit. When I was in Chicago, you didn't even see Prabhupada's Maha. There's too many devotees. They go to the sannyasis, GBCs, temple presidents. That was it. I don't even think the temple presidents got Maha. So in 77, I had the opportunity to get Brahman in Mayapur at the last Gopanim, which we know now is the last Gopanim festival. And we fly over there on a 747 plane, all devotees, nothing but devotees on the plane. That's a whole nother story. And one of my goals when I got there was, I want to get Prabhupada's Maha. I said, I have to get some Prabhupada's Maha. And so someone other, I knew where Prabhupada's room was, and I decided I will go to Prabhupada's room, and I'm going to sit outside that door, and I'm going to wait for Prabhupada's Maha to come out, and I'll get some. In those days in Mayapur, they only had that big kitchen that's down there for the local population, I guess, Subag kitchen or something they call it now. But that's where devotees used to. In Mayapur, was very poor in those days. Not much money, not much to eat. You couldn't even buy maha if you wanted to. You just either you eat what they had there, or that was it. You don't eat the rest of the day. So I decided, fine, I'll fast. I'm going to get some Prabhupada maha. And I went to that, sat outside Prabhupada's room, and sure enough, 3 ladies, Matajis, come up, and they go into Prabhupada's room with the trays. Then they come out, and they go down to the kitchen, and they lay those trays outside the kitchen. And it's just me and all Prabhupada's maha. So I decided I'm going to eat all this maha, because I said, I never see sannyasis down there eating where we are. I said, they're probably just eating Prabhupada's maha. So I'll eat all this maha, and they'll have to go down there and eat what we eat. I'm going to teach them a lesson. This is what I was thinking. But that cooking was Bengali cooking, which I've never had. You have to understand, in my American background, my mother cooked very simple, maybe a little salt, maybe a little pepper, that's it. So I grabbed the first thing, flaming hot chilies. My God, my mouth is just like, oh, what the heck is, oh. I look, there's some sweet rice. I put some sweet rice in my mouth. So, okay, let me try this. Chlorella. I never had Corolla before. Oh my God, bitter. What the heck is? Put some more sweet rice. Yeah. And in this way, I'm trying to eat Prabhupada's maha, but I can't eat it because it's Bengali cooking. So I did the best I could, you know. So anyway, I need to get to Bhakti Charu Swami. They want me to stop by 4:45. That past some I can extend it more, how it went on. But at least I got Prabhupada's maha. I got a darshan. That was another thing. I wanted darshan with Prabhupada. It was just me and Prabhupada. And I put my head on his feet. So Krishna was kind enough to let me have those three things at least. And leading to Bhakti Charu Swami, that initiation in Mayapur, that's when Bhakti Charu Swami received his Harinam and Brahman initiation at the same time. So I got my Brahman initiation on that Jagat too with Maharaj. So I guess to a certain extent, I'm a Mayapur Basi also. But in those days, especially, you know, all the emphasis was on America. Prabhupada was just beginning the Indian preaching. So, you know, who knew of Jai Pataka and all these other people? There was, you know, we're the ones distributing the books, sending all the money to India. We're all kind of proud. We're the big guys, and you people are just struggling over here, dependent on us, you know. So they weren't so well known, but now we see how great they are, you know. And there's no internet in those days. There's no, practically speaking, there was barely any postal service. Just imagine if you wanted a picture of Prabhupada in Mayapur or anything in Mayapur, how would you get it? Whoever developed that film had to go someplace and have it turned into prints. And then you had to mail them to somebody. It'd take a long time to get a picture or anything. So nowadays, everything's instant. But we see now the glory of these devotees. As we know, Bhakti Charu Swami, I think it had only been a year, not even a year, after meeting Prabhupada, that Prabhupada immediately gave him first and second, and a month or two later gave him sannyas. And my dealings with him came much later, of course, especially when I was in Philadelphia as a temple president. I was replacing Ravindra Sarup, who had retired, and the temple was, you know, having a little difficulty. So it was very difficult. At that time, practically none of the senior devotees would visit because there was so much fighting amongst the devotees. So who wants to go there when everybody's fighting, right? Who wants to go? We only want to go when everything's nice. Well, Bhakti Charu Swami would go. He would go. He could walk into those situations and just everyone would just calm down. Or, you know. So when I became the TP, of course, he would stay usually at this devotee named Kalvalya's house. The temple itself there was practically no one there to help him and take care of him. And when I was there, and I remember speaking with him, he goes, "Oh, Sikhi Mahiti, you're there. Thank you for coming. And I'm going to come stay at the temple with you." I was like, "No, Maharaj, you don't have to do that. You know, no. I want to be there with you and let us work together and keep Prabhupada's temple going." And he came and he would stay in that little room. That room was so small. And, you know, and he would just have to eat what we had. We practically had nothing there, you know, but it was always the same, equipose or blissful. You never see him lamenting or anything. And he's one of the first to come. And I called many people. Hey, I'm up here. I'm going to try to help get this temple together. Can you come up? Well, Prabhu, I don't know. You know, my schedule is such. Maybe. He was the first to come all the time. Then Deva Mitra Swami and who else? A couple others started coming, but Maharaj was always coming. He's fearless. You know, he went to New York in the middle of all that mess and helped rectify that. And even his coming to Florida, in a sense, was within that mood, really. You know, that he would take these risks for the sake of Prabhupada's movement, so that we can push this movement on and push it forward. And another thing I noticed about him also, he always seemed to keep this like younger brother attitude toward devotees, even people like myself, you know. I mean, Maharaj is way more advanced than me for sure. I consider myself his servant. But he always seemed to humble himself in a sense to me, which was kind of bewildering because I wanted to be more humble to him. I guess because, you know, like I said, he joined right near the end of the movement. When you join, doesn't show exactly, you know, how advanced you are. Advanced devotees can appear anytime. You look at Shukadeva Goswami. He was a 16-year-old boy. And when he comes to that area, Nama Shrayan, where all the sages are gathered, they never seen him before. And immediately they tell him, no, you speak. Imagine these sages have been, you know, 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 years old. And here's a 16-year-old boy. But they tell him, you speak to Maharaj Parikshit. So, you know, advancement is not a question of when you took initiation or where you were born or any of these things. So, Maharaj is very involved with the land temple and helping us also here to continue growing Prabhupada's movement. As you know, in Florida, he's starting his project down there. So I was really looking forward to getting more association with him. His door's always open, practically speaking, going anytime. And he was always, he never made you feel like I'm disturbing him. That's why I say, I feel like he act like a younger brother, you know? Some of the other god brothers, they would say, no, I'm too busy, you know, the servants say, let me make an appointment for you. But Bhakti Charu Swami or Jayapataka, anytime you just walk in, they would always open for god brothers, at least, to keep us encouraged, especially those of like ourselves who are not as advanced as they are, to keep us enthused in Prabhupada's service. So I'm going to stop here, trying to make the 10:45 time. There's some questions or something. How do I see these questions? I'm not.
Hare Krishna, Broji. I can select few questions. Actually, there is one question and a lot of comment about your talk. Thank you very much like that. So I will first share few questions. One question is, Hare Krishna, Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances or glories to Srila Prabhupada. How do you feel we can keep Srila Prabhupada in the center in ISKCON? Sometimes it feels like in ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada's message is diminished. How can we collectively ensure his mission remains intact?
Well, we have to remember what is our purpose. Ultimately, all of us are working toward satisfying Krishna. And we sing this Nikunja, you know, Ratikeli Sita Yaya Yubir Yukira Peksaniya. I like that verse. I meditate on a lot. It says how the spiritual master is very dear because he's expert at assisting the gopis who are working for the perfection of Radha Krishna's loving affairs in Vrindavan. You know, think about that. What does that mean? Our goal is to see Krishna happy. What makes Krishna happy? When he's with Radha. So let us make arrangements for them to be together all the time. This is how they're thinking in Vrindavan. So someone will become a tree, somebody becomes grass, somebody becomes water. They're willing to do anything to make a lovely atmosphere for Radha and Krishna to enjoy. And the Guru, what is he doing? He's also engaging those who are less advanced and in this Nitya Leela of making Radha and Krishna happy. So for us, it's very clear that Srila Prabhupada is the current Acharya. Previous to Prabhupada, there was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Slightly different mood, but same purpose. We go all the way down the Pramral, back to Krishna himself when he first spoke Bhagavad Gita. At the end of the Gita, he says, hey, just abandon all this religion. You just love me. That's what I mean by surrender. And then he says, for one who explains this science to the devotees, this person is very dear to me. nor will there ever be one more dear to me, and surely you will come to me. So he gives hint for what this was coming in Kali Yuga, this preaching. So Prabhupada he's the Acharya, which means we are going to work to fulfill the mission as he has envisioned it. You know, we can't say, okay, I want to serve Krishna like this. No, I like to serve Krishna like that. Why not? I have this propensity, so let me offer my propensity to work in this way to Krishna. What is wrong with that? Oh, there's nothing wrong with that. But what is more perfect? Well, let me try to please the current Acharya. So for the next 10,000 years, everyone should be working, those who are connected to ISKCON, to fulfill Prabhupada's mission, even though we have our gurus. All the gurus are thinking like that too. We are all working to satisfy fulfill Prabhupada's desires. And if we think like that and not what I like, what makes me happy, and I think I can do this better for Krishna. No, that's nice too, but there's a higher platform. And this is how Prabhupada began this movement. These devotees in the beginning, what did they know? They didn't even have books, practically speaking. When they went to London, they didn't even have a Bhagavad Gita. And look what they did. Because their heart was like that. Big sannyasis from Bhaktisiddhanta went to London. Who could quote scripture and who were so culturally advanced as those sannyasis? And here's some hippies. But that's the power of grabbing having the desire to satisfy the Acharya. So you have to remember that if you want the higher taste, then you have to become more selfless. And what is the highest selflessness? It's to satisfy the Acharya and become the servant of the servant of the servant in this way.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you very much for this answer. Another question is one devotee asking, remember Kishore is in Chicago. Prabhupada named and said the special as Kishore name came first, usually Radha. Name is the first before Krishna. Do you know that story?
Yeah, someone asked Prabhupada about that also. Because those deities, those deities actually came from a Pandal program. I can't remember which one, but in India, Prabhupada would have these big programs, and he would do a deity installation at the Pandal. And then those deities would be sent to a temple. They were actually meant for, I can't remember what another temple, but our Sri Govinda, who was the president at the time, he saw those deities, and the deities he had ordered, he said, no, I'm not taking those deities, I'm taking these deities. So he got, in a sense, stole those deities and brought them to Chicago. And this Kishore, he's very beautiful. So Prabhupada saw the face and he says that's his Kishore age. At the pinnacle of his perfection of his beautiful youth. So therefore he named him Kishore. And he said, well, why? He said, because he's so beautiful, so his name is first. He was so beautiful, you have to say Kishore. So this is Prabhupada's, he can do like that. He can do like that, right?
Thank you, Prabhuji. There is one question. Prabhuji, to get more sincerity in devotional service and to improve devotional service, what is the process?
You have to associate with those who are sincere. That's what you have to do. If you're fortunate enough, you look for that association. And whatever you associate with, you take on that nature. So that's the easiest way. Just like when I joined, I didn't know anything. But as soon as I walked in, I saw those devotees' faces. Whatever they're doing, I said, that's what I'm going to do. I had no doubts about it. During that Mangal Arti, I seen those devotees was just, I've never experienced anything like that. Even though I didn't say, when I ate prasadam for the first time, I didn't like it. I grew up eating, meat and things like this, simple food. And now here's this rice dal. I was like, God, what the heck is this? All these spices in my mouth. I didn't like it. But I didn't care. I said, whatever they're doing, I'm going to keep doing this. It was just, it's contagious like that. So you find that association and then you take some guidance from it and you'll grow that way.
One last question. Hare Krishna, bro. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much for depicting so vividly and so much detail what devotee life was like in the early days. Thank you also for all the humorous tales and for cheering us up. Would you please tell us whether there was any particular instruction from Srila Prabhupada that you held on to the most after he left the world? Thank you, your servant Divya Radhika Devidasi.
Yeah, I joined, of course, I would say there's, generally you find they take the Leelas and they divide them into Adi, Madhyam, and Ancha. So I was kind of in the Ancha Leela of ISKCON, you could say, in those days, the last 3 years. So there's no question of, all of us were striving to do something in such a way that Prabhupada would call us. I know I felt like that. I wanted to, therefore I would go out, let me try to sell the most books so that Prabhupada, he would read the list and he would see that. And he would go, yes, very nice, Sikhi Mahiti. There's a devotee here in Atlanta, his name is Charadeshana. He was the first devotee to distribute like 200 big books in one day. Normally devotees do 20, 30. It would take, 8 hours to do that. He did 200. This is the beginning of the Christmas marathon. And Srila Prabhupada wrote him a letter. So everybody's like, oh wow, okay, I have to, even when he would visit temples, you know how he decided which temples to go to? You can guess, whatever temple sold the most books, that's where he would go. So this way we were striving to. So of course, when I got initiated, Prabhupada gave me those instructions. Those are the instructions I received from him. And I've had, after he passed away, some dreams where he was very specific a couple of times that I should do, which was shocking. So that's very personal. I rather not say, but I was in my mind trying to decide, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I not do this? And then all of a sudden this dream, probably like, oh God, don't tell me like that, bro. Anyway, even to get that, that's nice, but still, like we have the desire to fulfill the mission of Prabhupada under the guidance of our spiritual master. That's what we're perfecting now. And from that, you'll find that everything else will come. You see, now your mind will be fixed. Now you'll be controlled. So many things will be there. You don't have to perform unnecessary austerities, but I can perform any austerity to fulfill that mission. And therefore, these devotees could go to London with no money, do so many things that we're doing, because in our heart, we were thinking like that. So this is what we want to cultivate. Under guidance, of course, not just whimsically, I'm going to do for Krishna. Unless we're in a situation where we have to act in that way. But nowadays we have such a big society, so we should just find one piece of it and dedicate ourselves to perfecting that Krishna consciousness in that part of the world where we are. You see, and by your desire, it will happen. Krishna will fulfill your desire. So that's what we have to do. I want to do this. Like Shiva Maharaj went to Hungary. He just stayed. I asked him one time, why didn't you just stay in London? You were charged there. He said, well, I had to decide either London or Hungary. I couldn't do both. So I decided I'll just stay in Hungary since I speak Hungarian and there was a need and there's so many devotees in London. And see what manifests there. And this will attract Prabhupada. This will attract Krishna's attention. Oh, look, right on the spot, 11 o'clock.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prabhu. There are a few comments like there is one devotee, Uttam Shlok Prabhu. He is requesting to visit Chicago. And there is one devotee, Ram Chandra Prabhu. Is telling thanks for taking us.
Atlanta Key. He used to be on our book distributor, him and his wife, Sitaram.
Thanks for taking us back to our good old days in New Mahiti Dham. With you, especially your Sunday feast talks, Ram Chandras. So we are very indebted for giving us opportunity to have your association today and enlightening us in so many ways. You talked about that. You talked first about how the first meeting you're coming to Krishna consciousness through the BTG magazine that your brother brought, and your first service pot washing very nicely you narrated the pastime, and this Satpat Prabhu also got this service only, but later he was shifted to Bhaktivedanta Institute. You told that how the early days were so austere, especially this no waste of Krishna's money, and you all used to take bath with the cold water in Chicago cold, and you talked about these how Srila Prabhupada, the power of a pure devotee. Just by seeing a pure devotee, everybody feels to serve him. And you told the pastime of that, how these police and they used to chase after you, the book distributors. But when Srila Prabhupada came to airport, then they were just like become the humble servant, and they were making the ways for Prabhupada to go. You narrated the pastime of getting opportunity to touch the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada, having Srila Prabhupada Mahaprasada on the experience. And he also told about His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami in Guru Maharaj, the pastime, how he used to go to the conflict zones where nobody wants to go. He was equipped, fearless, take risk for Srila Prabhupada moment. And the very nice point that he always presented himself as the younger brother only, very humble. And you told the Kishore Kishori pastime, how they got the name, and how to progress in Krishna consciousness. We should associate with those who are sincere. So thank you very much for narrating all the pastimes with so much lessons to learn, and we beg for your blessings to empower all of us so that we can follow these teachings and become a loyal servant of Srila Prabhupada and continue our services in the mission of ISKCON for the pleasure of Guru and Krishna. And we also request your grace to kindly visit Ujjain. This is the one of the main project of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj. Everybody will be very happy to have your association at Ujjain. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. So we
Thank you.
express our heartfelt gratitude to Prabhuji by loudly chanting one time Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Hare
Krishna, Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna
Krishna, Hare
Krishna,
Hare,
Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare
Rama, Hare
Rama, Hare
Rama, Rama
Rama, Rama
Rama,
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
His Grace Sikhi Mati Prabhu Ji ki jai, Jagat Dushra
Jai,
Path ki jai, Gaur
Jai,
Premanande, Hare Hare.
Haribo.